All right, let's hop into part 2 here of our NCPL Season 5 draft breakdown. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the new format and everything from the last video. I'm going to be rocking out solo on this one. Once again, shout out Ty for the layout and putting all the work in for this. But yeah, let's just hop right into it. We're starting off here with Tommy's team. Probably the most shocking first-round pick out of everybody, but it's fitting with the new mascot and team name. We got the Shibuya Salamence, or Shibuya, however you pronounce it. Awesome logo, by the way. Look at that. It's so crispy. But yeah, he took Salamence first overall to be his Terra Captain. I think Salamence is a really, really strong Terra Captain. It really just takes like one turn to flip a game upside down with a Dragon Dance or a Moxie Boost or whatever. Yeah, so no issues with that. On my end, it was just kind of jarring seeing like a 14-pointer go in the first round out of nowhere. Or a 13-pointer even. I can't remember exactly what the base total is. But yeah, so he has some interesting stuff here. First off, speed tiers look good. I think he covers pretty much everything. There is a gap here between 85 and 60, and there's technically a gap between 85 and 100. I want to say Urshifu is the only thing, or maybe Hydreigon. It might have to be base 98 to be in that gap where that's not covered. For the most part, that covers it. Let's see. On the top end, a little redundancy with Screamtail and Zoroark, but that's fine. Zoroark being redundant with stuff actually is a benefit to it because it's able to disguise better. And, you know, stuff like Greninja, Thundurus, Salamence, it can disguise as, and you don't necessarily get a read on which mon it could be because the speed's similar enough. So yeah, okay, let's talk about just the team overall. Good hazard setters. You know, Tinglu is one of the best ones in the game. Honestly, if Tinglu is your only hazard setter, you're probably bringing it most weeks anyway. It's going to be fine running that. But he has Greninja for spikes and toxic spikes, and then Screamtail with stealth rocks. All three super viable. My main concern with the team, however, especially having Salamence as a Terra Captain, is that Decidueye is his only removal. I guess my biggest issue with Decidueye being the only removal is Zoroark. Zoroark is totally fine to be Life Orb or Specs or something, and honestly is probably better in Draft League like that, but it definitely benefits from a Focus Sash with how frail it is. Realistically, maybe Greninja would be the only other like Focus Sash user on the team, so maybe it's not the biggest deal. But yeah, it's tough, right? You have a really good spike setter in Greninja and Tinglu, and then your removal is defog, so you're going to get rid of them. It's not going to make or break anything, really. I think the team is bulky enough to be able to pivot around, and yeah, between Screamtail and Tinglu, we saw it last season with Cordell. Like, we know how that works, right? You just wish it back up, they cover each other really well, and just keep it moving. Yeah, really, really good combo. Pretty scary, actually. Ton of momentum. Greninja, Zoroark, that's going to be a really crazy combo, I think. Because I'm trying to think of like common checks between the two of them would be like bulky dark types, aka Tinglu. You have it on your team. Not even like Tinglu wants to switch into a Greninja, unless you're making the read that it's Zoro. So I think that's going to be a pretty good disguise. I think using Zoro disguised as Salamence or Ceruledge to bait in like the physical checks for those two, and then just blowing them up with a Hyper Voice or Shadow Ball or Bitter Malice, whatever. I think that can work really well. I couldn't figure out what I would change, but it feels wrong to have Screamtail and Sylveon, right? Like they're going to Wish Pass, they're bulky on the special side, they're both fairy types. Screamtail obviously with a lot better speed, Sylveon with a lot better special attack. It might just be a case where it's kind of like pick your poison, and whichever matchup works, you just bring one of them. I don't know how often both are going to come because they do such similar things, but it might just be matchup dependent, and you have a little bit more flexibility in that sense with your special wall. Wishing back up things like Thunder, Saraledge, Ting Lu between Screamtail and Sylveon is going to be really helpful. I can't remember if Salamence still has Roost or not this gen. I know it lost Defog, but yeah, this team's scary offensively. Really, really tough to handle, I think. Like, you see all this momentum. I feel like people are just going to get trapped in the vortex trying to figure out what Zoroark is disguised as, and then it's just going to get messy. So hopefully Tom's able to pull out something with that. Even disguising as Saraledge, too, is pretty cool because it's immune to Ghost-type moves. That could definitely be an option. Yeah, I'm just kind of visualizing it right now. Anything else I want to mention with this? The type chart, little weak to Ice, Rock, and Fairy. Is that the biggest deal? The Fairy weakness is a little bit worrying, but you also have Terra Steel and Salamence, so like that kind of flips it, right? Like, on the type chart, you only have Fuecoco and Saraledge as a Fairy resist as of right now, because you don't have a pure Steel type. Fuecoco, you don't really count into the type chart, right? Like, I mean, it might come one of these weeks, and it's not completely useless. Actually lives some physical hits like crazy well. But yeah, as far as like a Fairy resist, I feel like Fairy is going to go pretty hard into Tom's team. But that said, offensively, he can kind of power through it with like Sludge Bombs and Gunk Shots, obviously Terra Steel, Salamence. Yeah, I think he can manage with that. Overall, I like the draft. A lot of cool mods that we didn't actually get to see a whole lot last season. I tried Saraledge in Boomer League and didn't really do too well with it, but I think that was more of a function of my team and not the mon itself. So hopefully Tom can show off a little bit with it. But we'll just go on to who he's playing in week 1, and that is the newcomer Demo. Welcome to the league, brother. Demo is a really good battler, and he's got a really good team. So we got our work cut out for us for sure. Fantastic speed tier coverage. Yeah, I mean, obviously the gap from Decidueye down to Dunsparce, but whatever. That's fine. You can live with that. Yeah, the type chart is immaculate. He's actually, I think, the only one in the league right now that doesn't have a majority weakness to a certain type. He has like a overwhelming majority of resistances to all the types, and then Fire, Ground, Rock, Ghost, Dark, and Fairy, he's neutral on average too. And of course, having Iron Valiant changing with Fairy and Ghost can kind of eliminate some of that issue as well. Yeah, going pure Terra Fairy or Ghost gets rid of that Fairy, like neutrality. That said, Moltres is a fantastic Fairy switch-in. I actually really wanted to draft it, but Cinderace was sitting right there, so I let it slide. But yeah, I love Moltres this generation. I think it's actually really good and really underrated. So looking at just like offensive power on his team, you kind of sleep on Moltres being a special attacker. But for the most part, this team is pretty physically offensive between Excalibur, Gyarados, Bisharp, Iron Treads, Decidueye. I would say most weeks you are running special Valiant, but it still has, 130 on physical attack, so like that's totally viable. Lot of momentum options on mons that are going to be coming often. Chilly Reception, Volt Switch, U-Turn. I think Dunsparce has Baton Pass, and that's why it's on there. He doesn't have to worry too much about removal. Obviously, Decidueye has Defog, but Iron Treads is one of the best spinners in the game, so going to be set on that front, and that's important, obviously, having Moltres too. Let's see. Any other glaring holes or anything? I guess if I was to optimize this a little bit, I probably would get a Spike Setter just to synergize with Bisharp a little bit more. But, at what cost, right? Does that change your type chart? Does that change how your points look? That's more of a luxury and a nitpick of the team, more so than anything. Slowking and Valiant, that's a tried and true combo, and I think that's going to be really important. Something we saw last season with Valiant is that if you're not getting it in like the mid game to kind of force some progress, it honestly felt a little underwhelming. as like a late game booster energy sort of sweeper. Demo is probably going to be able to use it more like that late game booster energy sweeper because of how strong most of his mons are. Like Baxcalibur, crazy 145 attack stat, glaive rushes, icicle crashes, earthquakes, obviously, just breaking holes and stuff. And then you have to be worried about setup from like Gyarados and Dragon Dance and sweeping you, of course. Bisharp, I can't believe they murdered the boy so bad. Still good, and it's going to be able to run a Violate, so it's going to be eating a lot more hits than you'd expect. So definitely keep that in mind when you're doing your calcs. But I am a sucker for Choice Banded Sucker Punch, so hopefully I get to see that once or twice this season. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a kind of Demo's calling card, is just drafting a really balanced team that covers everything, and then just kind of relying on like individual skill to utilize it. You know, I don't think there's any gimmicks here that are like too cheesy or anything, other than like a belly drum Slowking, of course. So yeah, you got to run that at some point this season. But yeah, just really solid squad. I don't really have a whole lot of notes. Just keep getting that momentum up to get in Baxcalibur and Iron Valiant, and you're probably just going to be chilling. Yeah, a good team. All right, so we got Dodge. He drafted first overall this season. Took Dragapult as his Terra Captain with that first pick. And it was actually really funny. Last season, Dodge drafted a team that was very similar to the one I used previously, and totally unintentional. And then this season goes ahead and drafts the first 3 picks that Demo had in that exact same league that that he drafted the team that I had. Yeah, so Dodge accidentally drafting teams that have already existed is a pretty good meme that we got going on right now. But that means he's seeing things, right? He's seeing how the team's going to work together. He's finding the pieces that are going to work together. And, you know, Dragapult, Corviknight, Urshifu, Rapid is a tried and true sort of offensive and defensive core. They cover everything that they need to, and a lot of momentum between the 3 of them. They just keep cycling, get you trapped in the vortex. We got Stealth Rocks on Arcanine, Spikes on Klefki, and then both on Clodsire. Corviknight is his only removal. But that's not really a bad thing at all, because most weak Corviknight wants to run Defog, and it's honestly one of the best Defoggers in the game. I think really the only argument for a better Defogger would be maybe Talonflame. But yeah, in what you get defensively from Corviknight, it's pretty much unmatched. And then, like I said, the top 3 with that momentum core, he still has like Electrode and Umbreon, Volt Switch, and Baton Pass respectively, to kind of keep the things moving. I think getting Arcanine into kind of break, and then letting Dragapult or Booster Energy Iron Leaves clean up in the end is going to be pretty key. I love Arcanine Hisuian. I drafted it last season, ended up dropping it, never using it, but I think the potential of like a Choice Banded Rockhead Head Smash is just, I mean, it's pretty much unmatched. Like, that just hits like a nuke. So no matter what you're switching into, that is going to get handled. Or at least chip down enough that Dragapult can kind of clean it up. So Dodge went with Ghost and Fairy for Dragapult. Ghost is great because you get a physical Ghost stab move for Dragapult that's not Phantom Force. Phantom Force is still good, and off-Terra Ghost is even better, obviously. But just being able to hit that one-time Ghost Terra Blast is kind of a game changer. Plus it boosts like Spec Shadow Balls and stuff. Fairy, I think, is my favorite like secondary typing for Dragapult because it allows it to set up a little bit more. Dragapult's like, I guess this gen is kind of going back and forth between physical and special and support. Like, it's kind of rotating what's popular. But I think with Terra Fairy, you're able to really run this physically and get behind a substitute with that Terra, and then just start DDing and win the game. So that's going to be really annoying. And then you resist Sucker Punches. You obviously become immune to Dragon-type moves as well. You're probably not clicking a Poison-type move into a Dragapult, so you don't have to worry about that. And it has the coverage to hit Steals already. I really want to see what Iron Leaves does this season. I love the Mon. I think it needs momentum, or it needs to be saved for like late-game booster energy sets. But that said, it could just be like booster attack with Sword Stance and just try to blow holes and stuff. Like maybe it has a better matchup than Arcanine 1 week because of the speed. Now with the speed, Dodge's speed tiers aren't the best. But at the end of the day, you have Dragapult, you don't really care too much. So like from 104 to let's see, well, yeah, to 65 is pretty much covered. The gap though, so obviously Dragapult's so fast. Basically everything that's above 104 speed is just going to be able to run like a boosting attack nature, Adamant or Modest or whatever. So I think Dodge is going to have to worry about stronger hits coming into him. But then, boom, you look at this. He has Klefki. You just throw up a screen. You're not even worried about it. Yeah, I think the team's going to work pretty well together. I like Spiritomb a lot. That's like one of the Gen 6 Draft League OGs. But something Dodge may consider later on in the season is potentially changing Terra Captain off of Dragapult. I think Dragapult obviously gets better with it, but I don't know if it's like necessarily the best value. And I think that's debatable. I don't know if I lean one way or the other on that, but something like Iron Leaves gets, in my opinion, more value from Terra, but it doesn't have the same ceiling as like Dragapult with Terra. But he could also do some sort of combo with like the lower points where he goes with Arcanine and Electrode as dual Terra Captains, and now Electrode becomes a lot more viable, having more coverage. Specifically ice coverage to be able to handle ground types that come in on it. And then you get another form of momentum to get into like Arcanine with like Terra Normal E-Speed or Terra Rock Head Smash. And now you're talking about a true wall breaker right there. But I think that's going to take a couple weeks to kind of feel out. And obviously we have transactions that we can make. So, just might as well play it out, see how it feels. And if you don't like it, move on from it. But otherwise, I think Dodge took advantage of that first overall pick pretty well. And, yeah, he did a good job with that draft for sure. All right, Cordell. I'm going to wrap this up with him. His team's hilarious. He's got demons everywhere, right? Especially Annihilate and Volcarona. Terrifier and Fairy is just, it's so good. Now, he's got a hazard setter all over the place. Toxic Spikes. Sandy Shock's doing it both with Spikes and Stealth Rock. Tinkaton, great rocker. Annihilate, a good suicide lead rocker if he wants to go hyper offensive, which he very much so could with this team. Now, we have banned Shed Tail, so Cyclizar cannot pass a Shed Tail to anything, which is huge, because if he passed a Shed Tail to Volcarona, that would be really, really awful. Yeah, can't sugarcoat that at all. But Cyclizar is still really good utility, and it's his only removal on his team, which is good when you I would still want to have more than just one version of removal, right? Whether that's a combo of Defog and Rapid Spin, or just two different Rapid Spinners that don't share weaknesses, so you have a little bit more flexibility each week. But Cyclizar being as fast as it is, and having other utility moves like Knock Off and U-Turn, I think he can get away with just having this. And since he has like Spikers and Rockers and all these hazards on his team, being a Rapid Spinner opposed to a Defogger is probably going to help him out a little bit more, since he can keep those hazards up on the other side, kind of. Now, Annihilate is also a fantastic hazard deterrent. It's a spin blocker. You defog into Defiant, you give it +2 attack. You call it on the switch in while it's fat enough to live a hit. Now you boosted its Rage Fist. So, like, Sandy Shocks plus Annihilate is such a good combo here. Looking at what we got, like, in terms of just base stat total and everything, he doesn't have a whole lot of physically offensive pressure, right? You have Annihilate, which can obviously snowball, but otherwise it's really just like Tauros. Technically Cyclizar is probably going to be physical. It has a better special attacking moveset, though, with like Overheat and stuff and Draco Meteor. Plus it's only base 95, right? So you're not too worried about what it's doing to you offensively. But let's see if this might work, right? Where you have like a Quiver Dance Volcarona for the end game. Use something like Galarian Moltres or Sandy Shocks or even Rotom to kind of break through stuff. plus all the momentum between the Volt Switchers. You got U-Turn on Gmolt. You got Chili Reception Glow King, which is so good. Yeah, I think that could work. I mean, Tauros Banded, obviously we saw what it could do when it was Terra'd last season with like a Terra Water Wave Crash. It's just crazy damage, but I think it's still going to hit pretty hard anyway. Tinkaton Banded Gigaton Hammers do a lot of damage even with bad stats. Yeah, I think he's really just going to have to get hazards up and use his momentum to wear down the other team, and then kind of let Volcarona clean up in the end game. Or maybe some sort of like Scarf Annihilate, where you're just kind of stacking Rage Fist boosts, and then you're just able to outspeed and Oko everything at the end. Are you missing anything here? A little bit flying weak, but Rotom is fantastic for that, so I guess you're not too worried about that anyway. A lot of fairy weaknesses, but you also have the best fairy answer in the game. Now, I will say, like, fairy types with coverage, a la Enamorus, they might give this team a problem, because Glow King doesn't want to be switching into, like, Terra Ground Earth powers, or even from Enamorus Therian, just regular Earth powers. That's not going to feel too good, actually. But otherwise, any other fairy type, Glow King pretty much just handles, with not a whole lot of issues. Yeah, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. I think between Rotom and Wo-Chien, and even like a physically defensive Volcarona, that's a pretty good Firewater Grass Core to kind of pivot around with. And Volcarona could just be bulky with a U-Turn Roost set and kind of spread status with like Will-O-Wisp, and kind of let something else like an endgame weakness policy Moltres or a booster energy Sandy Shocks kind of win. I just like having it as a luxury, but it would be cool if he had like a Trick Room Abuser off of Glow King with Trick Room Chili Reception into it. I'm nitpicking. That's not really a big deal, but something I would have tried to do. At the end of the day, like, his type chart looks really good. And yeah, I think Volcarona is just going to command so much presence in the team builder that if he can identify on the other team what's going to stop Volcarona, what's likely to come, and then kind of cater his team to beat those things, this is going to be a really tough matchup week in and week out. So thank God I do not have him on the schedule for my team this season. That's it, though. Yeah, the nice and quick breakdown for these four. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments, and expect part 3 to round this out tomorrow. So yeah, you guys take care. I'll catch you in the Discord. Peace.